right, so you guys are thinking maybe there is a shift growing around the country in terms of how consumers are shifting their diets. We're going to get a chance to talk about that today. My name is Paul Barron, and this is the Barron Report. Listen, we are seeing a consumer movement across the country when it comes to food, really like no other time in history. If you look back in the history and annals and have read books around how the food service industry started, this 1 year, 2020, has become kind of the new model of how consumers are essentially adapting. With me today, I've got the CEO and founder of a company called Fresh and Lean, Laureen Asseo. Great to have you on the show. Thanks for stopping in.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, Laureen, let's just jump right to it. I want to learn a little bit about Fresh and Lean. You know, I'm a meal kit user. I swear by them, and then I also swear at them sometimes. but for the most part, they're a great addition to our household. Tell me a little about how you got started with Fresh and Lean.
Yeah, so I started Fresh and Lean 11 years ago. At the time, I was 18 years old. I was going to school for apparel manufacturing and business management. So took a little bit different course when I decided to start this company. But it really came down to family. My father was struggling with a lot of health issues due to processed food and really the availability of good nutrition in this country, which is very limited. It conveniently. And so with that, he struggled a lot and needed to make a change. He went fully plant-based, really changed his life around, and in 6 to 8 months lost 85 pounds,
Wow.
like coupled with exercise. But nutrition had such a large foundation in that, and that really catapulted the idea to start this business because there are so many other people that are experiencing the same exact thing that he was experiencing at the time.
Yeah, it's if you look at the United States, obviously we're probably one of the most unhealthy first world countries in the world, if not the most unhealthy, especially with diabetes and obesity being a huge issue across the U.S. And of course, with the scenario of what you guys are trying to do with Fresh and Lean, let's talk a little bit about kind of the concept of delivering these kinds of meal kits to consumers. So we have seen a bit of a shift here in the past 6-8 months with COVID and kind of the effect of how it's kind of worked on the psyche of American consumers in terms of eating better. What has been your experience around the growth of your business? What have been some of the kind of the consumer trends you guys are watching?
So that's a really interesting question. And I think that we've seen it even from the beginning. So when I first started the company, I think there was a huge emphasis on health, on healthy eating, on clean eating, and a lot of emphasis also towards plant-based lifestyles, right, which at the 10 or 11 years ago, there wasn't such an emphasis on healthy eating. And I think a lot of that comes from education and what's available in terms of how to educate yourself on eating and weight loss and what's good for you and what's bad for you. So what I've seen, which has been really interesting, is where at first I thought health was the selling point. The real selling point was convenience. And I think that the health aspect was a great secondary point. And I think as we move towards a society that is a lot better educated on nutrition, I think that we become more and more educated on nutrition, and people now want to know what's in their body. So yes, convenience is great, but now I think there's a lot more emphasis on the health factor of the meal plan, which has not changed from the get-go. It's always been very centered around whole ingredients, made from scratch, no processed foods. You can turn over the meal and know exactly what's in it, even if something has sub-ingredients. Those sub-ingredients are clean. And I think that there's a lot of misconception out there about what's healthy and what's not healthy, and people who promote themselves as healthy, but then you turn it over and it's a little bit of a different story. Yeah. And so what's been really great to see, especially for me coming from a place where I want to give our consumers a good, clean, healthy lifestyle, is that people are actually caring about what they put in their body and looking to food as fuel, which is essentially what it is. It's fuel for our bodies.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I do think you're dead on with that. I got a chance to kind of witness the evolution of the fast casual restaurant concepts and kind of their whole mission to trying to shift away from QSR fast food, et cetera. In the early I should say early 90s when they really got a foothold and then have become the main, if not one of the key categories in the sector. But when you look at where the grocery industry is and where meal kits kind of inserted, we'll go a la Blue Apron or others like them. They kind of opened up with these gourmet meals, not necessarily, I mean, the calorie counts, today, I question some of the calorie counts that are coming in my own meal kits. So I'm kind of curious, when you look at the scenarios around these meal kits that are starting to essentially become one of the key factors in terms of food consumption at American households, how much is in the side of caloric, the caloric makeup of a kit versus making it taste great or making it super, interesting to a consumer that wants to order that product for you guys?
So I think it's an interesting balance, because I think a lot of people think that they could only make good tasting food if they pile a bunch of cheese on it or butter or things like that. And I think that it's an easy way out, So I think like you look at a lot of these kits and you look at a lot of these even like ready to eat meal programs who say that they're healthy, and we do a lot of testing just to see what's out there, to know the market, to know our competition. And that's one thing that I see a lot is that I don't want to say compromise on ingredients, but essentially it's a little bit what happens. And I think that there is definitely a sweet spot. And it comes back to the American palate. We are so used to heavier foods and processed foods. And so I think a big challenge that we face every single day too is how do we make a comfort meal, right? If we want to call it that, something that is a staple in a household that people go to eat. But how do we make it healthier without necessarily compromising on taste, right? And I think that's an always kind of never ending battle that we're going to be facing. I think that we do a pretty good job of it, but we could always do better. And that's where we rely on customer feedback and the customer data, because ultimately we want to know, well, what do you think of this meal? Like, what do you think of our rendition of a mac and cheese? Because it's not going to be exactly what you're used to, but we want to make sure that it's as good as it can be and not, totally shocking to where you're still going to enjoy it and get the benefits from it.
Yeah. So do you have culinary staff on your team that helps kind of create the menus themselves? What's the kind of the process of creating a new box menu for something at Fresh and Lean?
Absolutely. Yeah, we have a very robust culinary team, I'll call it. We have a head chef of product development. And so his sole job is to analyze data from the customers. And by data, I mean, reviews. We send out surveys. We want to know, what do you like? What do you not like? We're introducing new products. We want to get your feedback. Do you like that we tried to go a little bit outside the box, or do you want us to kind of reel it back in? Do you want us to do a little bit more creative recipes with different ingredients and different techniques? Or would you rather us stay more simple, but still offering variety? So he has a very, very important job in terms of product development. And it's something that he's doing every single day. We're constantly trying new meals, and I feel very fortunate because I get to try them every single day. I make a joke that he'll just come into my office and drop plates on my desk. So if I'm in a meeting and I come back, I'll more than likely have like 3 meals waiting for me. But yeah, so I mean, we do a lot of that. And then, I'm really instrumental in the menu development because it comes down to the mission of the company and the philosophy. And I want to make sure that we're never deviating from that. It's really important that we stick to quality ingredients and never compromising. So there's always that balance of bringing that in and then also making sure that we're staying true to who we are as well. And then translating it over to mass manufacturing. And I think that's where some people want to cut corners, but it is really important that we make things that can be batched out into thousands and thousands of portions.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so International Food Information Council released kind of their food and healthy survey here recently. Some of the things that were interesting to me is the percentage of people that are altering their food habits. 85%. That's a drastic shift when you look at what has been kind of an accumulated habit model that the American consumer has kind of evolved through, especially when if you look at the fact that just last year, we had just eclipsed 51% of food away from home for the first time in 35, 40 years. It's a huge move to have over half that food. So here's my question is, with that kind of growing population in terms of really changing out their food habits, whether they're getting it from the grocery or they're ordering through kits like what you guys are doing at Fresh and Lean, or they're going into, takeout and delivery and those kind of models, where do you think this is going to shake out in the future as the pandemic dissipates and we see kind of a new food consumer on the other side? Where do you think this is going to end up in terms of people sticking with it or staying with the habits that they're developing right now on into the future?
So I think that's interesting. And I think it's a couple parts to that question. I think one, what this pandemic is forcing people to do is not necessarily like a fad diet, but more like a lifestyle, because it's gone long enough to where it's a part of your life now. And I think that that's huge when it comes to perception, because it's really easy for someone to do a fad diet and to throw it away. And your body kind of forgets about it. Your brain forgets about it because we're always on to the next thing. Where when you're talking about a lifestyle and now you've ingrained it into your everyday, it's a lot harder to dispose of. So I am really hoping, just for the sake of those people, that they do stick to it. I think that what's really interesting for us and where we kind of fall into that is that, yes, we're healthy. So it's great if people stick to, our diet. They're not going to lose their results. They're going to still be in line with what they've worked so hard to do from home during these past 5-6 months. But I think one thing that we can never get away from is the convenience factor and we want it now. And one of the things that we've noticed so much in the increase in demand is, people can eat at home and they can cook. And I think that it's great. I think that so much of the values of food is when people enjoy it together as a family. Food brings people together in ways that a lot of things don't. I love to cook, but I also am extremely busy. I'm working a lot, and I know that a lot of people, they're either still working from home or eventually they're going to go back to the office. They have their kids at home. There's so many things. So I think that convenience will always be there. And so it's great that hopefully, the numbers in the survey that I was looking at, they're staggering, and it's extremely, extremely interesting. As I was flipping through it before I came on with you, I was just blown away by the numbers in such a positive way. So I do hope that it starts to trend this way, and that there are people like Fresh and Lean to help them along the way, because it is really daunting also to be doing that yourself every single day.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk a little bit about kind of the shifting tides here, because with 85% kind of moving into a little different diet, but also, and I do appreciate what you're saying about the habits now are kind of sticking. I just got through with a lot of research on habit forming for this very purpose. And many of the authors, PhDs, scientists all talk about if something sticks around for about 3 months, and you're consistent with it, it is a lifestyle change and can definitely have long-term and sometimes decades of effect on someone. So let's go into, so I would agree with that 100%. The questions I have in terms of the meal kits, because we are seeing a lot of movement in the space. We see restaurants building out meal kits now for delivery. We see the grocery chains starting to do some meal kits. And then we see the traditional products like yourself that are, blending in meal kits for delivery. I'm a user of that. Here's my question is, with that, you've got the issue of packaging. So I get a box every Friday. It's a nice, well-designed box, very eco-friendly, but it is a carbon footprint monster on my front porch. And the issue I'm always concerned with is the freshness of the products, because I won't mention the meal kit's name, but I do often get vegetables that come in that are not fully ripened, or they're over ripened. And I'm assuming that's just a supply chain mismanagement, but how can companies like yourself kind of address those two big issues in terms of freshness and then also packaging?
So I'll start with packaging. I know that at least for us, it's something that we work on all the time. It is a big feedback that we get from our customers is, how can we be more green? Can you please explain to us how green your packaging is. The recycling aspect is huge. So I will
Right.
say every day what we do is we look at, how can we be more green? And that comes from the meal lining that we absolutely need to keep the meals fresh. It comes from our trays, our film, the labels, like you name it. There's so many components of that we look at. So we look at not only how you can recycle it, but how can we move to biodegradable? And that's something that we hope to launch very, very soon is biodegradable packaging to just take it one step further and not only to put our consumers' mind at ease, but also our own. Because at the end of the day, I want that more than anything as well to help support our planet and the well-being. The one thing that's super important though, is I think that the technology of maybe products that are, completely green, they don't really hold up when it comes to like the temperature tracking. So unfortunately, that's something that the technology has to catch up with, because our number one priority is providing our customers with a safe experience. And I think that goes with all meal kits. And so you mentioned vegetables arriving that might be over ripened or not enough. It is a supply chain issue, but I think it's also a delivery issue. I think that it's very important to find the optimal time to ship, and then also what you're shipping with. If you're shipping in something that doesn't hold temp, it's going to have adverse effects on your product. So there has to be a balance between being eco-friendly and finding products that are good for our planet and make us feel good also as we're receiving it, but also that are safe for consumption. And so we really heavily look at both of those. And that's huge. And then as far as the carbon footprint, I think that there's a lot of things that we could speak to in terms of how the carbon footprint of, let's say, using like a FedEx affects things in terms of getting your box to you. But then when you think about, I'm going to drive my car, unless you have a Tesla, which not everybody does, to the grocery store to go pick up my goods. And then I'm going to come home and then I'm going to go here. So, it's interesting to kind of look at the balance between the two. Also the fact that FedEx, if you think about it, they're driving around all the time, but they have multiple boxes in their truck that they're dropping off. So how does that affect it as well? So again, I think we look at so many factors when it comes to being green, the carbon footprint. And there are some things that are a little bit out of our control, but necessary. And then there are things that are 100% in our control that we will continue to better. And I think that everybody is going to do that because they're going to have no choice to. I think the consumers are really dictating what they want. And it is very clear that they want things that are more green and eco-friendly.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's interesting because we've been looking at quite a bit of research around this very issue of when you look at just the scenario of people going out to eat. Let's say, for instance, you've got a family of 3 or 4 and you're doing 3 takeout meals a week. You're going, obviously you're going to the restaurant, unless you're a smart takeout person, you're ordering 2 meals at a time. But most of the time they're ordering a meal at a time from each individual restaurant. So that's a trip there. That's another packaging scenario. There's a lot there when you look at that, especially when you look at the volume of people that are doing that right now. So that's one of the reasons I think meal kits actually have an advantage here, because when I get a meal kit, I get 4 meals in my kit. And that's basically 4 nights of food for family. And, we also augment that with grocery and so much, but we've reduced a lot of our takeout product quite a bit. And some of it has been just because of the issue and the hassle of having to go pick it up and deal with that. So.
And that's a great point too, because I was just having this conversation with somebody else where if you look at, let's say, takeout and you look at meal kit, you have, different containers, you have the styrofoam, you have the bag and all of this stuff. And it gets messy. You just have a lot of different Tupperwares and things like that. If you get just a meal delivered, you have your dinner, that's 1 tray, and then it, like you said, it comes in a box. You may have lunch for 5 days. You may have lunch for 7 days. You may have lunch and dinner. So it really depends on what you're doing. But yes, I think that getting it all at once and then minimizing the amount you're using for that meal also helps a lot when talking about sustainability.
Yeah, for sure. Laureen, so when you look at some of the trends that are now kind of hitting the industry, as a last question here, what are some of the things that you think you're watching out for? You guys get a lot of consumer feedback. You're getting a ton of food feedback as well. So kind of what's hot, what's not. Is there anything that's kind of sticking out in your mind right now that's saying, wow, we really need to be, whether it's plant-based or other elements? Has anybody really reached out to you guys and started asking for alternative proteins that are a little bit more exotic yet?
Yes, and that's actually a really interesting point that you bring up. I think that what we're seeing right now is a trending more to plant-based, which I think is great personally. I think that it forces us, to be a lot more creative and using alternative like plant-based meats. But those are one of those things, though, that you have to be very careful of. There's a lot of alternative meats out there that are heavily processed. So when we go out and look for them, we're extremely picky about what we're using. We do use Beyond Meat in terms of, doing that with some of the meals, but we're always on the lookout for another meat substitute. And that is a big trend that we're seeing right now is there's a huge want to be plant-based and to order plant-based meals. So I think that we have a really fun and exciting time ahead of us to create more plant-based meals that are going to be appealing to a meat eater. And I think that that is like my biggest challenge and joy at the same time is when we R&D a completely vegan meal and I give it to someone who I know if I said it was vegan would absolutely not try it. And then they try it and they're like, oh, wow, this isn't chicken. And it's like blows them away. So that's kind of what we're really focusing on right now, as well as we always look out for different trends and diets that people want to try. Because if they're going to do it, we want them to do it safely. But I'd say that looking at it, it definitely plant-based is coming back full force.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. You guys, how far into the country do you ship since you're on the West Coast? Where's the furthest east point of delivery for you?
So we ship nationwide and to Alaska and Hawaii. So we reach all parts of the country.
Have you seen any specific region that has shown greater growth in meal kits from what basically from your customer base?
So we have a lot of people, I think East Coast, West Coast, when you look at like the states that are along the East and West Coast, those are always huge markets for us. The Midwest is actually expanding though, and Texas is a huge state for us. And what I will say is when I started the company 10 years ago, I did customer service and I was the chef and everything. And I would take customer service calls from people from the Midwest and they had no idea like what quinoa was, or it was always kind of funny. And now everybody is really on the same page about food, which is great. So we're seeing an increase in demand in all of these products really around the country.
Very cool. Laureen Asseo, CEO at Fresh and Lean. Great to have you on the show. Thank you for stopping in.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. So you guys, of course, are listening in over on the podcast right now. Maybe you're on iTunes or on Spotify. Just drop us a review. That's a great way for us to get feedback from you on what you want to hear about here on the Barron Report. And if you're over on YouTube, make sure and subscribe. That's how you're going to get notified of new content. But it's also a great way for you to see other content here on Foodable Network. And of course, if you want to reach me, hit me up on at Paul Barron on Twitter. And lastly, if you have a great idea and you want to email it to us, just send it to producer@foodabletv.com. We'll catch you next time right here on the Barron Report.